Now I know what you're thinking. Maxwell, a second straight PSG video in the same week? Absolutely. We never miss a chance to make fun of PSG on this channel. This is basically a continuation of the PSG Legacy of Failures video. If you haven't watched it yet, absolutely do so. It basically goes through every Champions League failure PSG's gone through since Qatar first took them over. Watching that video will make this one even funnier. But anyways, commence the title card. After one of the most catastrophic bottle jobs known to man against Real Madrid, there were a lot of questions surrounding the future of Paris Saint-Germain. One of those questions was whether or not Kylian Mbappe was staying at PSG for the 2022-23 season. Many, including myself, believed that this was the last straw and Mbappe would leave for Real Madrid. What followed was a tug-of-war throughout late spring between PSG and Real Madrid, each trading blows with contract offers, promises, and, even politician influence. After a few weeks, Mbappe agreed on terms with both clubs and announced he'd make a decision on May 21st. As he'd agreed to both contracts, many believed Mbappe was going to Real Madrid due to the many times he said it was his dream club and all. However, in the end, he shocked everyone by choosing to extend with PSG. Mbappe became easily the most paid player in the world. However, in Mbappe's words, it wasn't just about the money. It was actually because he was convinced of PSG's promises and their new project going forward. Basically, he was given the title of God Emperor and had influence over hires and transfers. An example of his power being exercised was the appointment of a new sporting director after Leonardo was kicked to the curb. He requested the club bring in Luis Campos, who had worked for Monaco when Mbappe was there. Manager was another hole to fill after the club sacked Maurizio Pochettino. Mbappe wasn't able to get his first choice, which would probably be Zinedine Zidane. However, Christophe Galtier was still a fantastic option for the French club. Galtier led Lille to a Liga title 2 years ago and Nice to a runners-up finish in the Coupe de France. PSG paid a fee of around 10 million to Nice in order to bring the French manager in. PSG's new project was based on an approach to transfers where the club would focus on bringing in younger talent and also utilizing their own academy players. This resulted in a complete overhaul in the summer window. Levin Kurzawa, Colin Dagba, Andre Herrera, Leandro Paredes, Julian Draxler, Gini Wijnaldum, and Italy's dad of the year, Mauro Icardi, were all loaned out. Then you had Rafinha and Angel Di Maria leave on a free. Di Maria was still quality, but considering he was now 34 and getting injured so often, it was time for the two to part ways. 20-year-old right-back Tiano Balde was wasted by PSG and got sold to Troyes for 3 million. 32-year-old center midfielder Idrissa Gana Gueye experienced mixed success with the Parisians. He was now returning to Everton for 4 million. 29-year-old goalkeeper Alphonse Areola has been loaned out to 6 different clubs in just 8 years. However, now he's finally found a home at West Ham for 9.3 million. Another player sent to West Ham was 25-year-old Thilo Kehrer for 12 million. 20-year-old forward Arnaud Calimundo was loaned to Lens last season and scored 12 goals. However, that was not enough to see him be a part of the new project as he was sold to Rennes for 20 million. Finally, there was PSG's most promising youngster, 19-year-old Xavi Simons. Although he didn't play much under Pochettino, he impressed with his youthful energy and skill. He was offered a contract extension until 2027 but turned it down, opting for a move elsewhere. And eventually, he signed for PSV on a free. While this does feel like a massive loss in their rebuild, PSG have a clause that allows them to buy back the Dutchman for just 4 million. Then came the arrivals in the new culture revamp of the Mbappe era. PSG, in need of a backup striker, turned their heads to 19-year-old Hugo Ekitike. The Rome striker scored 10 times and was loaned in with an option to buy for 35 million. The Parisians then went for a new right-back in Nordi Mukiele from Leipzig for 12 million. The midfield for years has been an area of struggle, with every player since the departures of Blaise Matuidi and Thiago Motta being okay at best and absolutely dog shit at worst. In this window alone, though, the club was not playing around. They bought Renato Sanchez for 15 million. The 24-year-old was one of Lille's best players last season, despite missing 15 games due to injury. 25-year-old Carlos Soler was also acquired from Valencia for 18 million. He had scored 11 goals and assisted 5 in the previous La Liga season. It didn't stop there though. PSG also added 26-year-old Fabian Ruiz to their weapons in the center for 23 million. Ruiz was another Spaniard who experienced success in the previous season, scoring 7 goals and assisting 4 for Napoli. For another 41.5 million though, 22-year-old Vitinha became the 4th midfielder to join. He's skillful and quick in his control, allowing him to wriggle around tight areas with ease. He also averaged the most key passes per game of any Porto player last season, making him a great outlet. Finally, after a solid loan season last year, left-back Nuno Mendes' deal was made permanent for 38 million. Under new manager Galtier, PSG were set up in a 3-4-3. His playstyle saw both the maximizing of the team's individual star skills and an an injection of fluidity throughout. In the first 6 league games, PSG won 5, drew 1, and scored the most goals. However, we're not here to talk about Liga. PSG will eventually win the league title. The real focus, of course, was the Champions League. PSG were drawn into a far less difficult group than last time, with Benfica, Juventus, and Maccabi Haifa. Their first test was against a struggling Juventus side, and Mbappe would disrespect them with 2 brilliant goals. Although, while the performance from the big 3 was absolute magic, there were still times when PSG showed weakness off the ball. Juventus, prior to this fixture, were struggling to produce any chances, and the Parisians made them look way better than they actually were. But at the end of the day, it was the first Champions League game under new management, and PSG got 3 points. Paris Saint-Germain would go on to win their second group match against My Hero Academia thanks to sparkling displays from Messi, Neymar, and Mbappe. But next was Benfica, a team who, before a draw, had won 13 straight times. And throughout the first half, Mr. Raboneman's team bombarded the Parisian defense. But it would be the flash of brilliance from Lionel Messi that gave PSG the advantage. However, after the goal, they were still struggling to deal with Benfica, and eventually an equalizer was scored in the 40th minute. The second half, though, finally saw PSG take over. They created 12 of their 15 shots in this half. However, PSG could never find the winner, and the match ended in a 1-1 draw. The teams played again in Paris just 6 days later, and despite missing Messi, the Parisians took the lead through a penalty right before the break. Unfortunately, that goal was cancelled out after Marco Verratti gave away this penalty. PSG bounced back though 2 weeks later, annihilating Maccabi Haifa 7-2. Their last group game would be away at Juventus, and unfortunately for the Parisians, Neymar would be out. Juve had way more injuries though, and still managed to outshoot the French club 15-7. However, in the end, PSG would find a way to defeat the old lady 2-1. But in classic PSG Champions League fashion, they missed out on winning the group after Benfica won 6-1 against Maccabi Haifa. There were multiple tiebreakers in this, so let me just quickly review. The 2 were tied on points, so then that would go to goal difference, and they were tied there too. Next was goals scored, same results. And the following tiebreaker was away goals scored, which Benfica had more of. So as a result, Benfica draw Club Brugge in the round of 16, a wasted opportunity considering PSG would now have to get past familiar foes Bayern Munich.
Ain't you had enough punishment for one day?
And then, we finally entered the clown saga once again. Back in late October, sources were already saying Kylian Mbappe felt betrayed by all the broken promises PSG made. It was said that Mbappe had been let down because he was supposed to be the heart of PSG's new project, but didn't believe the current reality of the club reflected that. I mean, no shit. It's been 143 days since the extension. But it goes a little bit deeper, because despite PSG's extended unbeaten run, they weren't exactly playing that well. There are a lot of concerns about Christophe Galtier lacking in tactical knowledge. The Champions League displays were certainly showing that, with the Parisians lacking in off-the-ball quality, covering the least amount of distance of any other team in the competition. And it was evident that PSG were still very reliant on their individual talent, so nothing's really changed there either. And going back to Mbappe, despite the fact that he had 12 goals in all competitions already, he wasn't exactly happy with the role he was playing. Instead of a lone striker, the forward wanted to be paired with a second striker, kind of like his role in the national team. PSG tried to satisfy his request, but failed miserably.
Damn.
Mbappe was also promised the arrival of a world-class defender in the summer. Milan Skriniar was linked with the club, but nothing ever came to pass. Speaking of transfers though, up to this point, all of Luis Campos' transfers weren't performing at all. It was either that, or every time they touched the ball, their ligaments would turn into milk powder. And then, there was the Neymar situation. Mbappe was told Neymar would be sold in the summer. However, not only is he still around, he's actually thriving in the playmaking role Mbappe desired. See, it's already a bad idea to promise your star player with an ego the size of Jupiter the role of God Emperor, but it's even worse though, when you barely fulfill any of those promises. And then after the World Cup break, things only got worse, because not only was there drama behind the scenes, but now PSG's individual stars were experiencing at least some kind of hangover from the World Cup. PSG started this season unbeaten throughout the rest of 2022. However, 15 days into the new year, they already acquired 2 losses. Then at the beginning of February, Mbappe gets injured, and it didn't take long to notice how much the club was still relying on the striker. The Parisians were eliminated by their bitter rivals Marseille in the the Coupe de France. Then 3 days later, they lost 3-1 to Monaco. PSG would also have to play Bayern without Mbappe starting. Throughout the first half, Bayern dominated as PSG struggled to even look like a team. Oh, and why don't you look at that? It's one of their own again. However, things drastically changed once Mbappe was subbed on in the 57th minute. 72 minutes played, Mbappe with his signature move runs in behind the defense, but his shot is saved. However, seconds later, Neymar has a shot, it's saved, but it falls right to Kylian Mbappe. And it's offside. 81 minutes played now. Nuno Mendes bursts down the left side, squares it to Kylian Mbappe, and finally PSG have their it's offside again. PSG with all their might tried everything in the last 30 minutes, however they just could not score. But with the aggregate being 1-0, there was still a lot of hope going into the second half. Especially with their X-Factor Kylian Mbappe back, many believed the second leg would see the PSG attack burn the Bayern backline alive. Into the second leg set in Germany, both teams traded blows. But then came PSG's big chance. Jan Sommer dribbles a little too much, gets caught out. Vitinha now has an open net, but he practically tries to pass it into the net, and Matthijs de Ligt easily clears it off the line. Things get even worse though when Marquinhos, who started with an injury, can no longer continue. Nori Maqwell comes on for him as a result in the 36th minute. But then into the second half, he gets injured, and now PSG have to put all their hopes and dreams on the back of a 17-year-old inexperienced defender. Oh boy. Here we go again.
Suburb of Paris. Verratti running into a bit of trouble, taken back. It's gone his right. Pulled for Choupo-Moting. Hard to find Gnabry. The two substitutes linking up Gnabry.
Au revoir.
And so, the entertaining clown saga that funds my channel continues for yet another season. And you might be wondering, where was Mbappe? There was all this talk about how he was gonna turn things around, and even articles were being made on how to stop him. Well, needless to say, there might have been another alleged kidnapping. But this is the 5th time in the last 7 years that PSG has been eliminated in the round of 16. Remember, this is a club that has spent over $1 billion in the last decade, and also, might I mention, they have Messi, Neymar, and Mbappe. And to not even get past the last 16 with all of these things shows just how truly mismanaged this club is. Now, in defense of the club, projects take time and there should be some leniency towards PSG. But even then, the situation actually seems worse than it was before. There's questions on whether or not Messi or Neymar will be at the club next season. Same with Coach Galtier, and if he does leave, that's just going to add to the instability for PSG. I think it should be mentioned that since the QSI takeover, PSG have had 6 managers in the last 11 years. But the worst of the questions going around the Parc des Princes has to be Kylian Mbappe. PSG has broken more promises with this man than I have with you guys. To quote the man himself after PSG was eliminated, No, I'm calm. The only thing that matters to me this season is winning the championship, and then we'll see. Listen, I don't want to reach too much here, but I'm just saying that is most definitely not I will stay at the club next season. We could talk about for ages how this team still does not play like a team. And when you have to play against a strong Bayern side that actually knows the concept of being a team, you're screwed. But PSG since 2017-18 has spent over 800 million. And in the match against Bayern, they subbed on Maqwell, Bichiabu, Zaire Emery, Ekitike, and Juan Bernat. Obviously, yes, the first 2 substitutions were injury substitutions, but still. Now we look at Bayern, who spent 300 million less in that same period. And they subbed on Leroy Sané, Sadio Mane, Serge Gnabry, and Joao Cancelo. They've also, by the way, won a Champions League trophy in this period. Now we could definitely talk about how PSG are starting to use their youth academy players more often, but we've seen this before and they were sold to another club a season or 2 later. So I'm not going to be saying anything about that until I see a youngster regularly playing for the team. But what do you guys think? Will the situation at PSG get worse or better over time? But of course, a massive shout out to all our patrons, including Janos Barash, Chris Damasceno, Miliue009, Weston Ware, Aldipu, Alex Rod, Ulta, Amin Suarez, Aresan, Carlos Anaya, Daniel Ortiz, Francisco Hernandez, Miguel Munoz, Return Fire, Rory Byrne, The Motor Drive, Tomicus, Trevor Batson, Vanilla Mexican 17, Victor, David Dunn, Dominic Griffin, Emmett Shea, Lewis, Joe Aparicio, MX Weeb, Patrick Barley, and Unbroken Persona. If you'd like to join the Patreon, there'll be a link down below and up in the annotations. You can follow my Twitter if you want, follow my Instagram if you'd like, follow my TikTok, trying to get to 20,000 there, and of course you can follow my semi-active Twitch, although I haven't streamed in about 3 months, so it's probably inactive now. But until then, I'll see you guys.